おじいさんのアニメクラブ
This next segment is all about the true story of the banned Pokémon episode that put children in the hospital. Come with me on a little journey back in time, if you will. The internet was still young, there were only 151 Pokémon as yet discovered, and the principal just made an announcement effectively banning Pokémon cards at school, claiming that the game was a form of gambling, and such things would not be tolerated any longer. Someone stole Kyle's Charizard holographic from his gym locker, and no one knows who it was. And the only way you were going to get a Growlithe in Pokemon Blue was to trade a Vulpix with your buddy who had link cables. But don't let Mrs. Gentry see that you're doing it, because she'll lock both your Game Boys in a desk drawer, and then nobody wins. It was a simpler time, and lucky for me, it was a cherished part of my childhood. Everybody had Pokemon fever. And to help feed that need to catch 'em all, we also had our very own anime to watch with, hands down, one of the most epic opening theme songs to this day. We didn't have instant access to global information like we do now, and a lot of the anime news and rumors came from message boards and forums on the basis of trust me, bro. I remember hearing about an episode of Pokemon that had flashing lights that supposedly triggered epileptic seizures in those who were watching it on television. Kind of like the telephone game, parts of this story were muddled with wrong information, and a bunch of us at school were under the impression that Pikachu's electricity was just too bright and that the children's eyes couldn't handle looking at it, so they fainted. It faded into memory as I got older, and I eventually just assumed that it was as much of an urban legend as Super Saiyan 8. But as wikis became a thing, it wouldn't take us brainwashed Pokemon completionists long to notice that there were some episodes of Pokemon that never aired in the United States. While looking at this list, my mind instantly went back to the lunch period conversations about the Pokemon episode that sent thousands of kids to the hospital. Could it actually have been true? It wasn't until much later that I was able to get my eyeballs on this particular episode that I learned it to be more or less true. What really happened? Well, I'm now going to talk in more detail about the legendary 38th episode of the first Pokemon show called Den-no Senshi Porygon. The English equivalent would be Cyber Soldier Porygon or Computer Warrior Porygon. So here's the story. There's an issue at a nearby Pokemon Center with the Pokeball transmission device. The Pokemon are going in, but sometimes a less rare Pokemon comes out, or even nothing at all on the other side. Ash, Misty, and Brock meet the scientist who created this transfer system named Professor Akihabara. He's insistent that there's nothing wrong with the hardware or the programming, but does notice something particularly disturbing. He doesn't reveal what it is to Nurse Joy or to the trainers, but they end up seeking him out at his residence. After a trial, they are ushered in and more or less forcibly transferred into the digital world alongside his personal creation, the CG Pokemon Porygon Unit 1. He explains that a strange group stole his Porygon Unit 0 and then used his transfer device to enter the cyber world through a PC. He surmises that they must be the ones who are stealing the Pokemon as they're being transferred between PCs. This group of thieves is none other than Team Rocket, called Rokuto Gang in Japanese. Akihabara-sensei can't just put in a strong antivirus software to solve the problem, because if he did, the humans inside would die. So he's using Ash and crew to solve the problem digitally instead. When they find Team Rocket, a fight ensues and each side uses a Porygon against the other, which is essentially a stalemate. While the fight is going on, Ash removes the blockage that Team Rocket was using to stockpile all the Pokeballs. Unbeknownst to our heroes, Nurse Joy called in tech support of her own, and is having Geek Squad install antivirus software, which is now threatening the lives of everyone in the digital world. If there wasn't an actual health issue caused by this episode, one might jokingly guess that the episode was removed from syndication for getting kids interested in watching more digital monsters on a competitor that came soon after. One might also say that Pocket Monster execs couldn't prove that Digimon copied their idea from this Porygon episode because they couldn't show the episode as proof. Silliness aside, the problematic aspect of this episode happens when the antivirus software causes a system error with its weapon. Essentially, it caused a huge explosion that nearly killed the humans inside the PC, and Nurse Joy bars the IT guy from ever using that command again for fear of damaging the transfer system and the Pokemon still trapped inside. This buys time for everyone to get out of the cyber world, And thanks to the last electric shock from Pikachu as everyone is re entering the physical world, the antivirus missiles explode again in a rapid flurry of flashes between two solid colors, red and blue. And this is the exact problem with this episode that caused issues for many who are watching it. So, what happened? Allegedly, the flashing of blue and red at that frequency induced photosensitive epileptic seizures in over 600 people who were watching this broadcast on December 16, 1997. This became known in Japan as the Pokémon shock. Once news started coming in about this bizarre occurrence, the Pokémon anime went on a 4-month hiatus until they could figure out what exactly happened and how to prevent it from happening ever again. The episode was pulled from syndication and not aired in any other country. While I recently watched this episode for the first time with my wife, I was extra cautious and turned on all the lights because who knew if I could be similarly affected by this malicious antivirus software? Which, saying that is actually kind of comical considering how harmful antivirus software ended up being for so many people. When we got to the scene in question, my inner 12-year-old was still expecting Pikachu's electricity to cause me instant blindness. I held my breath, squinting, but unwilling to look away. This may be the last thing I ever see, but at least I'd know the truth behind the urban legend of Pikachu's epileptic shock. I didn't know the red and blue flashing was the actual source of the problem until I saw it, because I actually found it to be very uncomfortable to watch and immediately had to look away from the screen. It didn't have any effect on my wife, but I certainly found it to be a bit jarring to watch, nothing more than that. I'd like to take this opportunity to read some information from the May and June 2001 issue of Skeptical Inquirer that cites many contemporary articles that analyze the Pokémon shock phenomenon. I encourage you to seek it out because it's actually a very interesting read, but I'll just share a bit of information from the Pokémon Panic timeline to give authentic figures to those of you watching or listening right now, so that you can decide for yourself whether this mystery is a case of mass seizures or mass hysteria. Tuesday, December 16th, 1997, 6:30 p.m. Pokémon Episode 38, Computer Warrior Polygon airs. The flashing lights segment begins at about 6:50. The Fire Defense Agency claims that between 6:50 and 7:30, 618 children were rushed to hospitals with convulsions, headaches, and vision problems. Tuesday, December 16th, 1997. Later that night. Evening News reports that hundreds of children were taken to hospitals from Pokémon fits. Some news shows then rebroadcast the scene suspected of causing the seizures. A second wave of children, number unknown, is affected upon hearing the news. Wednesday, December 17th, 1997. Pokémon attacks are the talk of the schoolyards. Television and newspaper headlines Wednesday morning were dominated by the reports. The number of victims reported in the media ranges from over 600 to over 700. Thursday, December 18th, 1997. Yomiuri Shimbun newspaper reports that nearly 13,000 children had at least minor symptoms, with 685 taken to hospitals. Friday, December 19th, 1997. Yomiuri Shimbun reports on completed investigations by the newspaper and local boards of education, finding the number of children reported to have experienced fits, nausea, and other symptoms to be 11,870. So that's some definite food for thought there. But while you're marinating on that, I want to talk about a very interesting public service announcement that preceded the first returning broadcast of Pokémon after that 4-month hiatus. And it was given by a woman named Yuki Yadama, about whom I can't seem to find any information at all. Who is this woman? She's surrounded by tons of Pokémon plushies, balloons, and a corkboard covered in letters from children begging for the show to return. I'm just going to tell you everything that she said. April 16th, 1998. To all our viewers. Good evening to everyone in front of their TV. Starting today, the Pocket Monsters anime will be back on air. But first, would you please listen to an important message from me? Please ask the adults to listen in as well. As you probably know, many of your friends felt sick while watching Pocket Monsters on December 16th last year. Some even had to go to the hospital. First, we would like to apologize to them and their relatives once more. She bows. This is the first time something like this has happened to people watching TV anywhere in the world. While we knew those who were looking forward to the next episode would be a little disappointed, we put the show on hold for a while until we knew how such a thing could have happened. We immediately put together an investigation team and consulted specialists in the field so we could both learn the reason behind what happened and how to create anime that is safe to watch. This research was not just conducted by the TV station, but also with doctors and the government. At this point, she holds up a poster board showing a drawing of a satellite on top of a TV station building, and also a government building with a kanji for kuni, which means country, and 3 doctors in white coats discussing papers around a conference table. She continues, "The research revealed that the main reason behind what happened was a scene where red and blue screens would rapidly alternate 24 times a second." She holds up 2 pieces of paper, one red and one blue. In other words, red and blue switched like this at a very fast speed. At first, it was believed that very strong light or dangerous pictures had been involved, but that was not the case. In addition, we now know striped and swirling patterns as well as the color red should be used with caution. We will be very careful in the future, of course, not only with the future airings of Pocket Monsters, but other anime as well. She then shows a bunch of letters that were received rooting for Pokemon to start again. Then the camera pans to the Pokemon plushies, which appear to be thanking the viewers in their own language, as in a lot of Pika-Pees. Miyuki has one last request of everyone, and that is to watch television in a bright room, sitting as far from the TV as possible. I think we've all heard that one. And that right there is the true story behind one of the most unbelievable moments in anime history. I think the Porygon's next episode preview after episode 38 is also remarkable because episode 39 has a very controversial story as well. I'll touch on this episode as well as 2 others another time in the future, but I hope you've enjoyed learning about this banned episode of Pokemon. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think the numbers point to mass hysteria? Or do you think this episode absolutely needed to be pulled from the rotation? You can share your thoughts with me in the comments or send an email to ogsansanimeclub@gmail.com, and I may respond in a future video.
おじいさんのアニメクラブ。
The audio you just heard was from episode 1 of the OG Sans Anime Club podcast, which you can watch or listen to on YouTube, as well as other podcast platforms listed in the description below. I really hope you'll join the Anime Club by subscribing to this channel so you don't miss out on future anime and manga related videos just like this one, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Until next time, see you, Space Cowboy.
楽しいだ。またね。